They say blood is thicker than water, but for Ellaraine, Vance blood was just a currency. Picture this. You are 22 years old, standing in the rain on the edge of a desolate highway, watching your own brothers count a suitcase of cash. That was the price of her life. Caleb and Marcus Vance didn't just betray their sister. They sold her to the Obsidian Shadow Pack, the most ruthless killers in the territory, to settle a gambling debt. But here is the twist that no one, not even Ellaraine, saw coming. She thought she was walking into a slaughterhouse. She didn't know that Cairo Thorn, the terrifying Alpha King of the Obsidian Pack, hadn't bought her to be a slave. He bought her because he's been dreaming of her face every night for 10 years. This is the story of the Souled Alpha's Queen. The rain in Seattle always felt different, heavier, colder, like it was trying to wash away sins that had stained the pavement for decades. For Ellaraine Vance, the sound of the rain battering the tin roof of the Vance family trailer was the only music she had ever known. The Vance family, once a proud lineage within the Silver River Pack, had been reduced to this, a rusted double-wide on the outskirts of Pack territory, reeking of stale beer and wet dog. Ellaraine sat at the chipped kitchen table, her hands wrapped around a mug of lukewarm water. She wasn't allowed coffee. Coffee cost money, and her brothers, Caleb and Marcus, needed every cent for the tables at the Underground. "Stop shaking the table, Ellaraine," Caleb snapped, not looking up from the ledger he was scribbling in. He was the older of the two, broad-shouldered, with eyes that had gone flat and dead years ago. "I'm cold, Caleb," she whispered, pulling her threadbare cardigan tighter. "You're useless is what you are," Marcus chimed in, leaning against the fridge, tossing a coin. "If you'd shifted by now, maybe we could put you to work in the perimeter guard. But no. 22 and still skin and bone. You're a liability." Ellaraine looked down. It was the great shame of her life. In a world where wolves were currency, she was latent. She had the blood, she could hear the pack-mind link faintly like static on a radio, but she couldn't shift. To the Silver River Pack, she was a ghost. To her brothers, she was a mouth to feed. A heavy knock on the metal door made the trailer shudder. The air in the room changed instantly. The smell of ozone and sulfur seeped through the cracks, the scent of a high-ranking enforcer. Caleb slammed the ledger shut. Marcus dropped his coin. "Open it," Caleb ordered Ellaraine. She hesitated. "Caleb, who is that? Open the damn door." Ellaraine stood her legs trembling and pulled the latch. The man standing on the porch was massive. He wore a charcoal suit that cost more than Ellaraine's entire life. Rain slicked his shaved head, and a scar ran from his ear to his jaw. He didn't look like a Silver River wolf. He smelled like burnt pine and blood. "Vance," the man rumbled. He didn't look at Ellaraine. He looked over her head at the brothers. "Samuel," Caleb said, his voice cracking slightly. "Come in. Please." Samuel stepped in, and the trailer felt instantly smaller. He placed a black briefcase on the table. "The Alpha King is losing patience," Samuel said. His voice was calm, which made it terrifying. "The debt stands at 200,000. You have nothing of value. The Silver River Alpha has already disavowed you. You have no protection." "We have a deal," Marcus blurted out, stepping forward. "We told you on the phone. We have a trade." Ellaraine frowned, backing into the corner. Trade. They had no car, no land, no weapons. Samuel looked at Marcus, then slowly turned his gaze to Ellaraine. His eyes were amber glowing faintly. He looked her up and down, not with lust, but with the clinical assessment of a butcher eyeing a cut of meat. "This is the girl?" Samuel asked. "Elleraine Vance," Caleb said, rushing to the table. "Pure bloodline, even if she's latent. She's docile. She cooks. She cleans. She's young." Elleraine's breath hitched. The room spun. "Caleb," she choked out. "She's part of the package," Caleb continued, ignoring her sweat beading on his forehead. "You take the girl, you wipe the debt. That was the agreement." "No," Elleraine whispered. She lunged forward, grabbing Caleb's arm. "Caleb, what are you doing? You can't trade me. I'm your sister." Caleb shoved her back so hard she hit the stove. "Shut up. You think I want to be hunted by the Obsidian Pack for the rest of my life? You're finally good for something, Elleraine. You're going to pay our tab." The Obsidian Pack. The blood drained from Elleraine's face. The Obsidian Shadow Pack wasn't just a rival. They were monsters. They were the executioners of the werewolf world, led by Alpha King Cairo Thorn. Rumors said Thorn ate the hearts of his enemies. They said he was 7 feet tall and had ice in his veins. They said no woman ever survived his bed. "Please," Elleraine begged, turning to Marcus. "Marcus, please. Mom made you promise to take care of me." Marcus looked away, his jaw tight. "Mom's dead, Elleraine, and we're about to be if you don't shut your mouth." Samuel watched the display with no emotion. He clicked the briefcase open. Stacks of cash sat inside, alongside a document with a red wax seal. "The king accepted the terms," Samuel said. "The girl for the debt. The transfer happens now." "Now," Elleraine gasped. "I don't have my things, "You own nothing," Samuel said, stepping toward her. He produced a pair of silver handcuffs. "And where you are going, you won't need baggage." Elleraine tried to run. It was a pathetic attempt. She scrambled for the back door, but Marcus caught her by the hair. She screamed a raw, tearing sound as he dragged her back. "Stop fighting," Marcus hissed. "Don't make them hurt us." Samuel stepped in effortlessly, pulling Elleraine from Marcus's grip. He slapped the cuffs on her wrists. The silver burned her skin, a dull ache that neutralized any adrenaline she had. "Brothers," Samuel said, nodding to the table. "The debt is cleared. If we see you in Obsidian territory, we will kill you for sport." He dragged Elleraine out into the rain. She twisted, looking back at the trailer. Caleb was already counting the money. Marcus was opening a beer. They didn't even watch her leave. The door of a black SUV opened, and Samuel shoved her inside. The leather smelled of expensive cologne and danger. As the car peeled away, splashing mud onto the only home she had ever known, Elleraine didn't cry. The shock was too deep. She had been sold. Her life, her body, her future, signed away for a gambling debt. She curled into a ball on the back seat, shivering. She knew the stories. She was going to the Obsidian Pack. She was going to be a toy for the soldiers, or worse, food for the Alpha King. She closed her eyes and prayed for the car to crash. It was the only mercy she could imagine. The drive took 4 hours. They crossed the border into Obsidian territory as the sun began to set, casting long, bruised shadows across the mountains. The landscape here was different, wilder. The trees were ancient redwoods that blocked out the sky. Elleraine's wrists were raw from the silver cuffs. She hadn't spoken a word to Samuel, who drove in stoic silence. "Where are you taking me?" she finally whispered, as they turned off the highway onto a private paved road winding up a mountain. "The dungeons." Samuel glanced at her in the rearview mirror. His expression was unreadable. The estate. The king's estate. Yes. Eloraine's stomach twisted. If she was going straight to the king, it meant she wasn't being given to the pack soldiers. It meant she was reserved for him. The thought made bile rise in her throat. Cairo Thorne, the butcher of the north. The car crested the hill, and the estate came into view. It wasn't a fortress or a dungeon. It was a masterpiece of modern architecture, glass, steel, and dark stone cantilevered over a rushing waterfall. It looked like a villain's lair, yes, but a beautiful one. Dozens of guards patrolled the perimeter. They were huge, shifting uneasily in their human forms, their inner wolves close to the surface. As the SUV approached, they bowed their heads. Samuel stopped the car at the main entrance. "Get out!" He uncuffed her. Elloraine rubbed her wrists, her legs feeling like jelly. She stepped onto the gravel. The air here was thin and cold. "Follow me. Do not look the Alpha in the eye unless he commands it. Do not speak unless spoken to. Do not run." Samuel listed the rules like he was reading a grocery list. He led her through massive double doors into a foyer that could fit her entire trailer park. The floor was black marble. A grand staircase swept upward. "Wait here," Samuel commanded. He disappeared through a set of mahogany doors, leaving Elloraine alone. She hugged herself, her wet cardigan dripping onto the pristine floor. She felt filthy, unworthy, terrified. She looked at the door. Could she run? The guards outside would tear her apart before she made the gate. Then she smelled it. It hit her like a physical blow, a scent so powerful it made her knees buckle. It was dark, chocolate storm rain, and something ancient, like old parchment. It was the most intoxicating thing she had ever smelled. Her inner wolf, usually dormant and silent, suddenly woke up. It howled in the back of her mind. "Mate." No, Elloraine thought, panic spiking. "No, it's not possible. I'm latent. I don't have a mate. And definitely not here." The mahogany doors opened. Elloraine stopped breathing. The man who walked out was not the monster she had pictured. He was devastating. He was tall, easily 6'4", with broad shoulders that strained against a black dress shirt. His hair was dark, swept back messily. But it was his face that froze her. High cheekbones, a sharp jaw, and eyes the color of storm clouds, grey with flecks of violet. He stopped 10 feet away from her. He didn't look like a king surveying a purchase. He looked like a man seeing a ghost. Cairo Thorne stared at her, his chest heaving slightly. His hands were clenched into fists at his sides, turning his knuckles white. "Leave us," Cairo said. His voice was a deep baritone that vibrated through the floorboards. "Alpha," Samuel said, bowing and retreating instantly. The heavy front doors clicked shut. They were alone. Elloraine trembled, keeping her eyes on his boots. "Do not look him in the eye." Cairo took a step forward. The sound of his boot on the marble echoed like a gunshot. Elloraine flinched. "Look at me," he commanded. It wasn't a shout. It was a plea wrapped in an order. Slowly, agonizingly, Elloraine lifted her chin. When their eyes locked, the air in the room seemed to vanish. Elloraine felt a jolt of electricity zip down her spine. Cairo's expression was one of pure, unadulterated shock. He scanned her face, her pale skin, the freckles on her nose, the small scar above her eyebrow from when Marcus had thrown a bottle at her. "It's you," Cairo whispered. Elloraine blinked, confused. Sir. Cairo took another step, closing the distance. He reached out a hand, his fingers trembling, hovering inches from her cheek. He looked like he was afraid she would shatter if he touched her. For 10 years. Cairo murmured, his eyes searching hers frantically. Every night, the girl in the rain, the girl with the sad eyes. Elleraine pressed her back against the wall, terrified. Was he insane? I don't understand. I'm just Elleraine. My brothers sold me to pay the debt. At the mention of her brothers, Cairo's face hardened. The vulnerability vanished, replaced by a terrifying rage, but it wasn't directed at her. Sold, he growled, the word sounding like a curse. They sold you. Yes, Elleraine whispered. I'll do whatever work you need. Kitchen's cleaning. Please just don't hurt me. Cairo looked as if she had slapped him. He pulled his hand back. He took a deep breath, his nostrils flaring as he inhaled her scent. His eyes flashed violet, the sign of an alpha losing control of his beast. Work. Cairo let out a dark, dry laugh. You think you are here to scrub floors, Elleraine Vance? I don't know what else I'm good for. Cairo stepped in close, towering over her. He placed one hand on the wall beside her head, boxing her in. But he didn't touch her. He leaned down until his lips were inches from her ear. You aren't here to be a servant, Cairo said, his voice dropping to a rough growl that sent shivers through her entire body. And you certainly aren't here to pay a debt. He pulled back to look her in the eye. I bought the debt, Cairo said intensely, because for the last decade I have been dreaming of a woman I had never met. I painted her. I wrote about her. I searched for her in every pack from here to the East Coast. He gently tucked a strand of wet hair behind her ear. You are not my slave, Elleraine, he said. You are the woman who has been haunting me. And if your brothers think they sold you... A dark smirk played on his lips. They have no idea they just handed the queen to the king. Elleraine's world tilted. Queen. Before she could process the words, the exhaustion, the trauma, and the sheer overwhelming power of his aura took their toll. The edges of her vision went black. Her knees gave out. She expected to hit the hard marble. Instead, she was scooped up into strong, warm arms. I've got you, Cairo whispered into her hair as she faded into unconsciousness. I've finally got you. Elleraine woke up screaming. She scrambled backward, her heels digging into the mattress, expecting the cold steel of a cage or the damp floor of a dungeon. Instead, she collided with a headboard upholstered in velvet. She gasped her chest, heaving her eyes darting around the room. It was vast. Floor-to-ceiling windows looked out over a misty forest canopy. A fireplace crackled in the corner. She was lying in a bed large enough to sleep her entire family, covered in sheets that felt like spun silk. She looked down at herself. The filthy wet clothes she had arrived in were gone. She was wearing a t-shirt, oversized soft, and smelling distinctly of him. That scent, rain and dark chocolate. You're awake. Elleraine flinched, pulling the duvet up to her chin. A woman stood by the door. She was older, perhaps in her 60s, with kind eyes and a starched apron. She held a silver tray. I'm Martha, the woman said softly, stepping into the room. The Alpha asked me to bring you breakfast. He thought you might be hungry. Where am I? Elleraine's voice was a rasp. The Alpha's private quarters, Martha said, setting the tray down on the bedside table. It was laden with pancakes, fruit bacon, and coffee. Real coffee. The smell made Ellaraine's stomach grow violently. "Why?" Ellaraine whispered. "Why am I here? Why aren't I in the cells?" Martha looked at her with a mixture of pity and confusion. "Cells, child, the king carried you up here himself. He ordered the best doctors to check your vitals while you slept. He hasn't left the hallway all night." Ellaraine stared at the food. "Is it poisoned?" Martha chuckled softly. "No, dear. Eat. You look like a strong wind could blow you away." Martha bustled about, opening the curtains to let the morning light in. "Bath is drawn through that door. Clothes in the closet. The Alpha said you are to have whatever you wish." "Whatever I wish," Ellaraine repeated, testing the words. "Can I wish to leave?" Martha paused. Her face went solemn. "You can go anywhere on the estate grounds you like, but you cannot leave the mountain. The Alpha was very clear on that. For your safety. For my safety. Or his possession." Ellaraine waited until Martha left before she ate. She devoured the food with a ferocity she was ashamed of, but starvation overruled pride. Once her strength returned, she got up. She found the bathroom a spa-like sanctuary of marble and steam. She scrubbed the grime of her old life off her skin. She stared at herself in the mirror. The bruise on her arm, where Marcus had grabbed her, was fading, treated with some kind of accelerated healing salve while she slept. She walked to the closet. It wasn't empty. It was filled with clothes, dresses, jeans, sweaters, coats, all in her size, all brand new. She pulled on a pair of jeans and a thick grey sweater. It fit perfectly. Too perfectly. "How does he know my size?" Panic flared again. Cairo Thorne, the monster the king claimed he had dreamed of her. It sounded like a line from a bad movie, a lie to make her compliant before he used her. She had to escape. Ellaraine opened the bedroom door. The hallway was empty, though she could sense guards nearby. The house was quiet, a heavy, expensive silence. She crept down the hall, her bare feet silent on the runner. She needed a weapon. A knife from the kitchen, maybe. She turned a corner and found herself in a long gallery wing. The walls were lined with tapestries and ancient weapons, but at the very end there was a set of double doors left slightly ajar. A strange silvery light spilled from within. Drawn by a curiosity she couldn't explain, Ellaraine walked toward it. She pushed the door open. It wasn't a weapon room. It was an art studio, and it was filled with her face. Ellaraine stood frozen in the doorway, her breath caught in her throat. The room was chaotic, smelling of oil paint and turpentine. Dozens of canvases were stacked against the walls, some on easels, some thrown on the floor. Every single one of them was a portrait of her. She walked into the room, her heart hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. Here was a painting of her at 16, sitting on the rusted swing set behind the trailer park, a tear rolling down her cheek. She remembered that day. Caleb had sold her mother's locket. Here was a charcoal sketch of her sleeping, her hand tucked under her cheek. Here was a violent, abstract piece, just her eyes wide with terror, surrounded by darkness. She spun around, looking at canvas after canvas. He had captured everything. The curve of her neck, the way she bit her lip when she was nervous, the specific sadness that she tried so hard to hide from the world. These weren't just paintings, they were memories. Her memories. But how? He had never been there. He had never seen her until yesterday. She stopped in front of a large canvas on the main easel. It was different. It depicted her, but older, stronger. She was wearing a crown of woven thorns and black roses. Her eyes in the painting were glowing gold, the color of a shifted wolf. But I'm latent, she thought. I don't have a wolf. I couldn't get the eyes right. The deep voice came from the shadows in the corner. Elleraine gasped and spun around. Cairo was sitting in a leather armchair in the back of the room, a glass of amber liquid in his hand. He looked exhausted. His shirt was unbuttoned at the top, his hair messy. He looked less like a king and more like a man haunted. You... Elleraine backed away until she hit an easel. What is this? Are you stalking me? Did you have cameras in my house? Cairo stood up slowly, putting the glass down. He raised his hands in a gesture of surrender. No cameras, Elleraine. No spies. Just... this. He tapped his temple. That's impossible. She snapped, fear making her bold. You can't dream of someone you've never met. That's fairy tale garbage. Is it? Cairo walked toward her, moving with that predatory grace that reminded her he was the most dangerous predator on the continent. Tell me, Elleraine, on your 18th birthday, you went to the river alone. You waded in the water and screamed at the moon because you hadn't shifted yet. You cut your foot on a sharp rock. Elleraine went pale. She had never told anyone that. Not even her brothers. Cairo pointed to a small canvas on the floor. It showed a girl in the moonlight water, swirling around her ankles, blood clouding the current. I felt the pain in my foot for 3 days, Cairo said softly. He stopped in front of her. The scent of him was overwhelming in the small room, intoxicating, pulling at her very soul. The Thorn bloodline carries a burden. Cairo explained, his voice rough. We do not find our mates by scent alone. We are haunted by them first. The dream walkers, they call us. For 10 years, Elleraine, I have lived 2 lives. My life as king ruling this pack fighting wars, and my life in my sleep watching you grow up, watching you suffer, unable to reach you, unable to save you. His eyes burned with intensity. Do you have any idea what it did to me? He whispered. To see you hungry. To see those bastards treat you like trash. I sent scouts looking for the girl with the silver scar. But I didn't know your name. I didn't know your pack. He reached out, taking her hand. His skin was scorching hot against hers. Then your brother's debt file crossed my desk. It had a photo attached, just a grainy ID picture. Cairo let out a shuddering breath. I nearly burned the office down. I found you. Elleraine looked at him, really looked at him. She saw the lines of fatigue around his eyes. She saw the desperate honesty in his gaze. You bought me, she whispered. I paid the ransom, he corrected firmly. I would have given them the entire kingdom if they asked. I would have burned the world to get you out of that trailer. But Elleraine pulled her hand away, looking down. I'm nobody, Cairo. I'm latent. I can't shift. I'm useless to an alpha, especially a king. I can't give you strong heirs. I can't run with the pack. She gestured to the painting of her as a queen. That isn't me. You fell in love with a dream. I'm just broken goods. Cairo growled a low, animalistic sound that vibrated in his chest. He grabbed her by the waist and pulled her flush against him. Elleraine gasped, her hands landing on his hard chest. Don't you ever say that. He snarled, his face inches from hers. You are not broken. You are a survivor. You survived a house that wanted to crush you. That takes more strength than shifting into a wolf ever could. He leaned his forehead against hers. And as for being latent, he murmured, his thumb stroking her hip bone, sending sparks shooting through her nerves. You aren't latent, Elleraine. Your wolf isn't dead. She's sleeping. She's waiting. Waiting for what? Elleraine breathed, unable to look away from his storm-grey eyes. For safety, Cairo said. For a mate strong enough to protect her. He brushed his lips against her jawline, causing her knees to give out. He held her up effortlessly. I'm not going to force you, Elleraine, he whispered against her skin. I'm not your brothers. You are free to walk these halls. You are free to hate me. But I am going to spend every day of the rest of my life proving to you that you belong here, with me. Elleraine's heart was racing so fast, she thought she might pass out again. The logical part of her brain was screaming, run, but her soul and that quiet, dormant part of her biology was humming. What happens now? She asked, her voice trembling. Cairo pulled back, looking into her eyes. Now, he said, we go downstairs. I introduce you to my inner circle. And we prepare. Prepare for what? Cairo's expression darkened. The softness vanished, replaced by the Alpha King. Because your brothers didn't just sell you to settle a debt, he said grimly. They sold you because they knew something I didn't. The Silver River Alpha is planning an attack, and he thinks that by giving me a useless latent girl as a distraction, I won't see the knife coming for my throat. Cairo smiled, but it was a terrifying, wolfish smile. He thinks you are my weakness, Cairo said. He has no idea you are about to become my greatest weapon. Elleraine stared at the painting of the Queen with the glowing eyes. Weapon me, come, Cairo said, offering his arm. It's time for the Obsidian Pack to meet their Luna. Elleraine hesitated, then slowly she reached out and took his arm. The heat of the bond flared between them. For the first time in her life, Elleraine Vance didn't feel like a victim. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff about to learn how to fly. The great hall of the Obsidian estate was less like a dining room and more like a war council. A long table made of dark, polished oak ran down the center, seated with 30 of the most terrifying individuals Elleraine had ever seen. These were the elites, the inner circle. When Cairo walked in with Elleraine on his arm, the room went silent. 30 pairs of eyes, amber gold and green, snapped to her. She felt the weight of their judgment like a physical blow. To them she smelled like the enemy. She smelled like the Silver River Pack, weak, treacherous, and poor. Cairo pulled out the chair at his right hand. The seat of honor. The Luna's seat. A low murmur rippled through the table. Alpha! A voice cut through the noise. It was a man, sitting halfway down the table. He was older, with graying hair, and a face carved from granite. This was Elder Vane, the Pack's military advisor. Vane, Cairo acknowledged, remaining standing, his hand resting possessively on Elleraine's shoulder. You bring a stranger to the high table, Vane said, his voice dripping with disdain. And not just a stranger. A Vance. We know that scent. Her brothers are the rats who owe us money. Her brothers are dead to her. Cairo rumbled, his voice echoing off the stone walls. And she is no stranger. She is my mate. The silence that followed was absolute. Then Vane stood up. Mate or not, she is Silver River blood. And rumor has it, she is latent. A human in a wolf's court. She cannot defend this house. She cannot bear strong pups. She is a liability, Cairo, a weakness. Elleraine shrank in her seat. He's right, she thought. I am a liability. Cairo's grip on her shoulder tightened, not in anger, but in reassurance. You question my judgment." Cairo's eyes began to glow violet. The air in the room grew heavy with alpha pheromones, making the weaker wolves at the table lower their heads. "I question your infatuation," Vane shouted, slamming his hand on the table. "We are on the brink of war. The Silver River Alpha Daemon is moving troops to the border, and you bring his spy into your bed." "I am not a spy." The voice was small, trembling, but it was hers. Elaraine stood up. Her legs were shaking, but she forced herself to look Vane in the eye. "My brothers sold me like cattle," Elaraine said, her voice gaining strength. "They didn't send me here to spy. They sent me here to die. I have no loyalty to Silver River. They starved me. They mocked me. If you think I am here to help them, you are wrong." Vane sneered. "Pretty words, girl. But when the claws come out, what will you do? Hide behind the king." "Enough," Cairo commanded. The power in his voice forced Vane back into his seat. Cairo looked around the room. "Elaraine is under my protection. Any insult to her is a challenge to me. Does anyone wish to challenge me for the crown?" Silence. No one was suicidal enough to fight the Butcher of the North. "Good," Cairo sat down. "Now, eat. We have strategies to discuss." The dinner was tense. Elaraine barely touched her food. She listened as they discussed troop movements. Apparently, Alpha Daemon of Silver River was rallying smaller packs, claiming that the Obsidian King had stolen a high-ranking noblewoman, Elaraine, and that they needed to rescue her. "It's a lie," Elaraine whispered to Cairo. "I'm not a noblewoman. I'm nobody." "To Daemon, you are an excuse," Cairo replied quietly. "He needs a reason to attack us for our land. You are his casus belli." Suddenly the lights in the great hall flickered. A high-pitched siren began to wail. It wasn't a fire alarm. It was the perimeter breach signal. Samuel, who had been standing guard, pressed a hand to his earpiece. His face went pale. "Alpha!" Samuel shouted. "The west gate! The power grid is down! The sensors were jammed!" "How?" Cairo stood up, overturning his chair. "Inside job," Samuel grimaced. "Someone let them in." Glass shattered high above them. Ropes dropped from the skylights. Figures clad in black tactical gear descended into the hall, shifting mid-air into massive, snarling wolves. "Defend the hall!" Cairo roared. The dinner turned into a slaughter. The Obsidian elites shifted instantly, their clothes shredding as they transformed into their wolf forms. The sound of bones cracking and growls filled the air. Cairo grabbed Elaraine. "Get to the safe room. Samuel, take her." "No!" Elaraine screamed as a massive brown wolf lunged at Cairo. Cairo didn't even shift. He caught the wolf by the throat with his bare hands and threw it across the room into a stone pillar. "Go!" Cairo's eyes were fully violet now. "I will not lose you." Samuel grabbed Elaraine's arm and dragged her toward the kitchen exit. "Let me go." Elaraine struggled. "He needs help. He is the king. He doesn't need help." Samuel yelled, kicking the kitchen door open. "He needs to know you aren't dead." They sprinted through the industrial kitchen. Samuel pulled a handgun from his jacket. Silver bullets. They reached the back loading dock. It was raining hard. The night was chaotic, filled with howls and gunfire. "We need to get to the garage," Samuel panted. Well, the runaway bride." Elaraine froze. Stepping out from the shadows of the loading dock was a man she knew. He was holding a jagged silver knife. It wasn't her brother. It was worse. It was Commander Riker, the head enforcer of the Silver River Pack. the man who had beaten her father to death for insubordination years ago. "Riker," Elleraine breathed. "Your brothers send their regards." Riker grinned, his teeth yellow. "They got their money, but Alpha Daemon promised me a bonus if I brought back your head. He wants to send it to Cairo in a box." Samuel raised his gun. "Over my dead body." "That can be arranged," Riker laughed. Riker didn't shift. He moved with supernatural speed, knocking the gun from Samuel's hand and slashing the beta across the chest. Samuel went down, blood spraying onto the wet concrete. "Samuel!" Elleraine screamed. Riker stepped over Samuel's groaning body and advanced on Elleraine. She backed up until she hit the brick wall. "You're useless, Elleraine," Riker taunted, twirling the knife. "Latent trash. You can't run. You can't fight. You should have stayed in the kitchen." Elleraine looked around for a weapon. Nothing. She was going to die here. After everything, after Cairo, after the dream, she was going to die in the rain, just like she always feared. No. A spark ignited deep in her chest. It wasn't fear, it was rage. She thought of Cairo fighting for her in the hall. She thought of her brothers counting that money. She thought of the painting of the Queen with the glowing eyes. "You are not broken," Cairo had said. "Your wolf is sleeping." Riker lunged. Elleraine threw her hands up instinctively, and the sleeping wolf woke up. Pain. That was the first thing. It felt like her bones were being pulverized by a sledgehammer. It was a blinding, white-hot agony that tore through every nerve ending in her body. Elleraine screamed, but the sound shifted halfway through, dropping an octave, turning into a guttural snarl. Riker froze mid-lunge. He looked confused. "What the?" Elleraine fell to her hands and knees. Her skin felt like it was on fire. She could hear the snap of her spine, realigning the crack of her jaw, extending. It was agonizing, but it was also euphoric. It felt like taking a breath after drowning for 22 years. Usually a first shift takes minutes. It is slow and clumsy. Elleraine's shift took Skinkenstor. It was violent and explosive. Her clothes shredded. Fur burst forth, not brown or grey, like the Silver River wolves, and not black like the Obsidian Pack. It was white. Pure, blinding white, like untouched snow on a mountain peak. Riker stumbled back, his eyes widening in genuine terror. A white wolf. That's a myth. Standing before him was not a scrawny, latent girl. It was a beast. She was massive, her shoulder height nearly matching Riker's standing height. Her fur was thick and lustrous, glowing faintly in the moonlight. But it was her eyes that made Riker drop his knife. They were gold. Molten, burning gold. Elleraine the wolf looked down at her paws. She felt the power surging through her muscles. She could smell Riker's fear. It smelled like sour milk. She could hear his heart hammering a frantic rhythm. He hurt Samuel. He wants to kill mate. The thought wasn't human. It was instinct. Riker scrambled for his knife. "Demon!" he yelled, slashing at her. Elleraine didn't flinch. She moved faster than sight. She swiped her massive paw claws, extending like razor blades. There was a wet, tearing sound. Riker flew across the loading dock, slamming into a dumpster. He didn't get up. 3 deep gouges marred his chest. Elleraine stood over him, a low growl vibrating in her chest. She could kill him. It would be so easy. Snap his neck. End the threat. kill her wolf urged. No, her human mind countered. Answers. She placed a heavy paw on Riker's chest, pinning him down. He wheezed, blood bubbling on his lips. Suddenly, the door to the kitchen burst open. Cairo stormed out, covered in blood. None of it his own. He was in human form, his shirt in tatters, a sword in his hand. "Elleraine," he roared, scanning the dock. "Samuel." He stopped dead. He looked at Samuel bleeding on the ground. Then he looked at Riker pinned against the dumpster. And finally he looked at the massive white wolf. Cairo's sword clattered to the ground. The rain washed over them, but no one moved. Cairo stared at her with an expression of absolute reverence. In werewolf lore, the white wolf was a sign of the moon goddess's direct favor, a symbol of royalty, a true Luna. "Elleraine," Cairo whispered. Elleraine turned her massive head toward him. She chuffed softly, a sound of recognition. She stepped off Riker and padded toward Cairo. She nudged his bloody hand with her wet nose. Cairo fell to his knees in the rain. He buried his hands in her thick white fur. "I knew it," he choked out, pressing his forehead against her neck. "I knew you were special. But this... My God, Elleraine." Elleraine purred a deep rumble that soothed the adrenaline in his system. But the moment was cut short. Riker, broken but not dead, let out a wheezing laugh. "You think this saves you?" Riker spat. "Damon knows. He knows what she is. That's why he wanted her head. A white wolf, her blood, grants immortality." Cairo's head snapped up. His eyes went pitch black. "What did you say?" Cairo hissed. "Damon isn't coming for land," Riker gurgled, grinning through the blood. "He's coming to harvest her. He's already crossed the perimeter. He's here." As if on cue, a howl ripped through the night air. It wasn't a normal howl. It was amplified, mechanical, and coming from the surrounding mountains. Hundreds of howls answered it. The Silver River Pack wasn't just sending assassins. The entire army had arrived. Elleraine looked toward the forest. She could see them with her new eyes, hundreds of heat signatures moving through the trees. She looked at Cairo. She nudged him again, harder this time. "Get up." Cairo stood. The awe was replaced by the cold, hard resolve of the Alpha King. He looked at his mate, not a victim, not a liability, but a creature of legend. "Samuel is alive, but barely," Cairo said, checking his beta's pulse. "We need to get him inside. Then..." He looked at Elleraine, a dark, dangerous smile spreading across his face. "Then we show Alpha Damon exactly what happens when you try to hunt the Queen." Elleraine threw her head back and let out a howl. It was a beautiful, terrifying sound that shattered the glass of the remaining windows. It was a challenge. "Come and get her. Get me." The battle for the Obsidian Estate was not a skirmish. It was a massacre. The moment Elleraine's howl pierced the night, the forest exploded. Hundreds of Silver River wolves poured from the tree line, a tide of grey and brown fur, crashing against the sleek black stone of the estate. Cairo didn't waste a second. He dragged Samuel inside the reinforced kitchen door and hit the lockdown button. "Stay alive," he ordered the wounded beta. Cairo turned back to the rain-slicked loading dock. He looked at Elleraine, the white wolf, towering beside him. "Can you fight?" he asked, his voice rough. He wasn't treating her like a fragile porcelain doll anymore. He was speaking to a warrior. Elleraine chuffed, baring her teeth. She didn't know how to fight, not technically. She didn't know martial arts or takedowns. but she felt the ancient instincts of her bloodline surging through her. She knew where the jugular was. She knew how to break a hamstring. "Then hunt," Cairo commanded. He shifted. Cairo's wolf form was the stuff of nightmares. He was a midnight wolf, huge, pitch black with fur that seemed to absorb the light around him. He was only slightly smaller than Elleraine, but he was built like a tank scarred from 1,000 battles. Together, the white wolf and the midnight wolf leapt from the loading dock into the fray. The courtyard was a chaotic sea of violence. The Obsidian guards were outnumbered 2-1, but they were fighting with the desperation of men defending their home. Elleraine landed on a Silver River wolf who was trying to flank a young Obsidian guard. She didn't even bite him. The sheer weight of her landing crushed his ribs. She spun her massive tail, whipping around to knock another attacker off his feet. To the left, Cairo's voice boomed in her head. It was the mind link, clearer than a phone call. Elleraine ducked just as a grey wolf snapped at her ear. Cairo was there in a flash, his jaws clamping down on the attacker's neck, ending the threat instantly. They moved as a unit. Cairo was the shield, taking the hits, blocking the attacks with his armored bulk. Elleraine was the spear, using her speed and her terrifying size to break the enemy lines. But the Silver River wolves were relentless. They weren't fighting for territory. They were fighting for the prize. Every time they saw the white wolf, they swarmed, ignoring the Obsidian soldiers to get to her. "Bring her down!" a voice roared over the din. Alpha Damon stood on the roof of a parked SUV near the main gate. He was in human form, holding a heavy assault rifle loaded with silver nitrate rounds. He was a handsome man, ruined by cruelty, his face twisted in a manic grin. "Shoot the legs," Damon screamed. "Don't damage the heart. I need the heart intact." Bullets chewed up the pavement around Elleraine. One grazed her flank, burning like a hot iron. She yelped, stumbling. Cairo roared a sound so loud it shook the rain from the air. He charged the SUV, ignoring the wolves biting at his heels. Damon laughed and aimed the rifle at Cairo's chest. He pulled the trigger. Click. Damon's face fell. Jammed. Cairo launched himself into the air, shifting back into human form mid-jump to tackle Damon. They crashed off the roof of the car onto the asphalt. "You want her heart," Cairo snarled, punching Damon in the face with enough force to shatter his cheekbone. "Come take it." Damon was fast, though. He pulled a silver dagger from his boot and drove it into Cairo's shoulder. Cairo grunted, but didn't let go. They rolled, trading brutal blows. Elleraine saw Cairo bleed. The sight of his red blood mixing with the rain triggered something primal in her. The white wolf didn't just growl. She screamed. She plowed through the crowd, tossing wolves aside like rag dolls. She reached the circle where the two alphas were fighting. Damon had the upper hand. He had Cairo pinned, the knife raised for a killing blow to the throat. "Die, dream walker," Damon spat. Elleraine didn't bite Damon. She did something she didn't know was possible. She opened her mouth and released a command roar. It wasn't a sound. It was a wave of pure kinetic energy. "Submit!" The voice wasn't hers. It was the voice of the moon goddess. Every wolf in the courtyard, friend and foe, slammed their bellies to the ground. The sheer pressure of the alpha command flattened them. Damon froze his arm, trembling, unable to bring the knife down. His eyes widened in horror. He was an alpha, he shouldn't be affected by commands. But this was a queen. Cairo seized the moment. He ripped the knife from Damon's hand and drove his own fist into Damon's throat, collapsing his windpipe. Damon gagged, clutching his neck. Cairo stood up, panting, blood pouring from his shoulder. He looked down at his enemy. "You wanted immortality, Damon?" Cairo whispered, his voice cold as the grave. "History will forget your name by morning." Cairo didn't finish him. He stepped back. "Elleraine," he said softly. Elleraine stepped forward. She looked down at the man who had ordered her death, the man who had turned her brothers against her, the man who wanted to eat her heart. She didn't feel pity. She lunged, one clean bite. Silence fell over the estate. The Silver River wolves, seeing their alpha dead at the paws of the white wolf, began to whine. The fight drained out of them instantly. They rolled onto their backs, exposing their throats in total surrender. The rain began to slow. Elleraine shifted back. The change was smoother this time, though it left her exhausted and shivering on the wet pavement. Cairo was there instantly. He shrugged off his shredded shirt and wrapped it around her, pulling her against his warm, blood-stained chest. "It's over," he whispered into her hair, kissing the top of her head. "You did it. You saved us." Elleraine looked around at the devastation, at the kneeling wolves, at the rising sun, peeking over the mountains. "We did it," she corrected him. Then from the back of the crowd, two figures were being dragged forward by obsidian guards. They were kicking and screaming. It was Caleb and Marcus. They had been hiding in the trunk of Damon's car, waiting to collect their bonus. They looked at Elleraine, at the blood on her chin, at the army kneeling before her, at the king holding her. "Elleraine!" Caleb cried, his voice cracking. "Thank God, we were trying to help. We were undercover." "Tell him, Elleraine. Tell him we're family." Elleraine stared at them. The brothers who had sold her. The brothers who had mocked her. The brothers who had watched her leave without a second glance. Cairo looked at her, his hand resting on the hilt of a guard's sword. "What is your will, my queen? Say the word, and their heads are yours." Elleraine looked at Caleb, then at Marcus. She saw the fear in their eyes, the same fear she had lived with for 22 years. She took a deep breath. "No," Elleraine said. Caleb sagged with relief. "Oh, thank you, sis. I knew you. I don't want them dead." Elleraine interrupted, her voice hard as steel. "Death is too quick, and I don't want their blood on my land." She pointed to the north, toward the jagged peaks of the Deadlands, a territory where nothing grew, where rogue wolves roamed, where survival was a daily torture. "Exile," Elleraine commanded. "Strip them of their pack marks. Strip them of their name. If they set foot in obsidian territory, again, hunt them for sport." "Elleraine, no," Marcus screamed. "That's a death sentence." "It's a chance," Elleraine said, turning her back on them. "More than you gave me." As the guards dragged her screaming brothers away, Elleraine felt the final chain of her past shatter. She wasn't Elleraine Vance, the latent girl from the trailer park, anymore. She looked up at Cairo, the man who had dreamed of her for a decade. "Let's go home," she said. Cairo smiled, lifting her into his arms. "We are home." 3 months later, the restoration of the estate was complete. The scorch marks were scrubbed away, the glass replaced, and the gardens replanted. The obsidian pack was stronger than ever. With the absorption of the Silver River territory, Cairo Thorne was now the most powerful king on the continent. But everyone knew that the real power lay with the Luna. Elleraine sat in the art studio, the afternoon sun warming her back. She wasn't the subject of the painting today. She was the artist. She was painting Cairo. He was sleeping on the couch in the corner, finally at peace. No more nightmares, no more searching. "You're staring." Cairo mumbled, his eyes still closed. I'm studying. Elleraine teased, dabbing a bit of grey onto the canvas. Cairo sat up, stretching. He walked over to her, wrapping his arms around her waist from behind, resting his chin on her shoulder. He smelled of pine and home. "The council is asking for an heir," he whispered, nipping at her ear. Elleraine laughed, leaning back into him. "The council can wait. We have a pack to run." "True," Cairo agreed. He turned her around, his expression turning serious. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small velvet box. Inside wasn't a diamond. It was a ring made of twisted silver and gold, set with a piece of moonstone that glowed like her wolf's eyes. "I never formally asked," Cairo said softly. "I bought a debt. I fought a war. But I never asked." He looked into her eyes, the eyes he had painted 1,000 times. "Elleraine, will you be my mate, not because of fate, not because of the wolf, but because you choose me?" Elleraine looked at the ring, then at the man who had saved her by letting her save herself. She smiled, and for the first time in her life, she felt completely, utterly whole. "I choose you, Cairo," she whispered, "in this life and in every dream." He kissed her, and deep in the forest the white wolf howled in joy, a sound that echoed across the mountains, promising a reign that would become legend. The girl who was sold for a gambling debt had become the queen who owned the world, and that is the story of Elleraine and Cairo. From a pawn in a gambling debt to the most powerful white wolf in history. It's crazy to think that her brother's greed actually led her to her destiny. I want to know what you guys think. If you were Elleraine, would you have exiled Caleb and Marcus, or would you have chosen revenge? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story, please smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you haven't already, hit subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a new werewolf romance story. I'll see you in the next video.